Hello and welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm Sherry Duckworth, and joining me today is Mr. Jeff McKissick with Defense by Design. Thank you for being back with us on the show.
Sherry, I think 9 or 10 years now, the recurring guest, so I really appreciate you guys having me back so often.
We're glad we didn't run you off, so it's great to have you back on the show today. And we obviously trust your judgment and what you have to share with our community. So today we're going to be talking about workplace safety and security.
Yes.
It's quite unfortunate that sometimes people are afraid, to walk the parking lot of their workplace, or we hear in the news all of these scary things that are happening in people's jobs. And so we want to make sure that we're vigilant. So how can we be safe at work in our jobs?
Well, you just kind of really hinted as that personal vigilance. Too often, I think as employees, we look to our employers to keep us safe. And to a certain extent, legally, they have a responsibility to create a certain safe in-work environment. And this is, of course, why you see industries have grown up around cameras, alarms, and access control systems, and I'm all for those things. Even guard security companies and guard shacks and people who patrol parking lots, I'm all for that. But at the end of the day, my personal safety and your personal safety is our personal responsibility. So while, yes, employers can do things, and we'll talk about those in a second, that can enhance our safety, still the necessity of safety falls upon our shoulders in what we need to be doing. We need to be our brother's keeper out there in the workplace, not just employers looking that way with their employees, but even coworkers looking that way with their other coworkers. When you see a coworker going out maybe later at night or just into the parking lot by themselves, maybe say, hey, can you wait just a second? I'll walk with you. There's certain simple things that we can do to be our brothers and sisters keeper in the workplace that can enhance everyone's safety if we're just a bit more vigilant and diligent.
Right, that's so true. With your experience in Defense by Design, what have been your personal experiences, some of the things that have brought you to wanting to make sure that people are not only safe, just in public, but in specific areas like their jobs?
Well, especially in the area of workplace safety, and I run to this a lot in OSHA, which is the golden rule for all things safety in the workplace. They really specify something that most employers are not aware of, and that is if you have actual salaried employees, we're not talking about independent contractors, but salaried employees, you are legally responsible for their safety. And that sounds like, okay, well, Jeff, you just talked about that. Yes, but there's extenuating circumstances, which means if you have employees who work outside of the workplace, you are responsible for their safety too, since you sent them out there. Which means if you are a company that has, let's say, service trucks going to people's homes, if something happens to one of those employees on an assignment, you're responsible. If you have employees and you own several franchise operations, and they're in the store, they're working late night, and they're coming out at the end of the night off of a shift, you're responsible for their safety. If you have employees that do the bank draws and the pickups and the drop-offs during the day or after hours, you're responsible for their safety. If they're on your time, they're on your dime. And one thing that a lot of employers don't realize is that not only vulnerability, but legal liability they have where external employees are concerned. I think, though, when it comes down to it, so often people ask, well, why do you think we're seeing more and more of these cases? And one thing I've been reiterating over the last year is, if you think about it, unless you've served in military, law enforcement, or security, my guess is no one has taught you about your personal safety since 6th grade.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a common topic.
No.
It's something that unless someone brings it up, it's not always going to be discussed in social settings.
Yeah. Now, we'll discuss maybe sexual harassment in the workplace, but with the instances of violence that are occurring more and more, no one's really having that conversation with their employees the way they should. Or if they do, it's the ultimate worst case scenario of a workplace shooting. And not the more day-to-day things that can happen. In fact, there's a group called ASIS, the American Society of Industrial Security. And several years ago, they came out with an interesting report and statement that, and it's a couple of years ago, instances of workplace violence, the #1 issue of workplace violence, we used to think of as that fired employee who comes back with a vengeance. Now it's domestic violence manifesting in the workplace.
Wow, so what would that look like?
Well, it would look like someone's ex showing up at the workplace.
Yeah.
And it may not always involve a shooting, but it can be altercations, it can be verbal exchanges, things if you're in a restaurant, hospitality, retail type industry, you don't want that on your site any more than you do an active shooter.
Right, right.
But how do you have that conversation with your employees? And how do fellow employees have that conversation with each other to alert someone in management to say, hey, so-and-so just had to take out a restraining order, so their divorce isn't really going that well. We might want to think about what we need to be doing here in the workplace just in case.
Right. It's not gonna, no longer can it be one of those, we're just not going to talk about it things. It needs to be, no, we need to talk about this. What's our strategy? So getting ahead of it.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss only as long as it remains unchallenged. So we can't rely on that, well, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, because when you put your head in the sand, you represent or present a very appealing target to your enemy.
I see.
And we can't afford to do that physically or legally. But I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing more instances, because we just haven't talked to people since 6th grade about their safety. And yet the criminal element out there, they're constantly retooling, they're constantly redefining, they're becoming more resourceful, more sophisticated, and yet the general populace is operating at a 6th grade level.
So what can an employer do in order to help protect their employees in some of these scenarios?
Well, there are the common things such as alarms and cameras and maybe card access control where people have to buzz in or type in to get into a building. Some instances that just may not be realistic, especially if you're in a multi-tenant office building where everybody has equal access. But there are certain things that people can do physically, maybe even situations with guard patrols or others. But the biggest thing, of course, coming from my position, is educate your people. Because I'm not against hiring security, but what if you could educate all the eyes of your employees to be security for your business? That's doing double duty. And again, you're teaching people to be their brother and sister's keeper in that environment, so everyone is enhanced in their safety and their protection.
Right. I think of when you've worked somewhere for a very long time, especially. It's like when you go home, you have this false sense of security,
Yep.
you know, because it's so familiar. And the same thing happens when you've worked in one place for a very long time. You're familiar with your surroundings, with the parking lot, with the people in your office. How is that a danger to us?
Anytime you get comfortable in a place, that's the time you need to realize I'm becoming too comfortable in this place. Even in my own home, when I go out, take the trash receptacles out to the, now granted it's me, but still, I don't take instances like that for granted, because I realize the places you're the most comfortable, the places you're the most vulnerable, because you let your guard down.
Right.
So the more familiar we get with certain places, the more vulnerable we actually become in those places, because we are lulled into a false sense of security based upon past history, not present circumstances.
Right. I mean, and that applies everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. But today, of course, we're specifically talking about being safer in the workplace. Now, obviously, if you have eyes on you at the workplace, at the physical building, you're going to feel a little safer. People are going to be a little bit, hopefully, more vigilant. But what if you are sent off-site during work hours? What advice do you have to employees who have to leave, you know, the confines of their offices to go off-site to do work?
Yeah, if they're doing service, deliveries, whatever the case may be, couriering things between, whatever the case, even sales appointments.
Sure.
This is something that really, again, it goes back to all the programs we've done in the past about the personal safety, because yes, you're now out in the public. Your employer can provide you certain education, but it's up to you for the execution of that while you're out navigating public, which means stay off your phone.
Right.
When you're out in public places. I certainly don't want you texting or calling while you're driving, but even more so when you've parked at a place and you're navigating between car and building. That's where you want to stay off the phone and off the text and pay attention to your surroundings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a biblical principle, right, to be wise as a serpent. You know, you want to be gentle as a dove, but you also want to make sure that you're being wise and you're considering the fact that we live in a world that's, you know, people make unhealthy choices. There is corruption. There is sin in our world. And we have to be aware of that.
Well, and not only from career criminals, you can run across the wrong person at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Who just lost their job, just lost a divorce, just lost a custody battle, just lost their temper with someone else. It could be road rage or whatever. And you've now crossed this person's path. They're not a quote-unquote career criminal. They're just right now a normally rational person caught in a very emotional and irrational moment.
Yeah.
But that person too can represent danger. So before you engage and enrage someone that you really have no history to, especially if you're looking at things like Black Friday coming up and the holiday season and others, you really need to back off and realize, is it worth it to push my point that I'm right, I was correct, I was in the right lane, or it was my place in line? Is it really worth it to press that point with someone that you don't know?
Yeah, and when you're at work, you're representing your company. But
Right.
then too, if you're a person of faith, you're not only representing your company, but you're representing your faith. You're representing your Christian belief system.
And what better place and instance to exercise the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. And it's amazing that I quote that biblical principle in Proverbs so often in HR conferences and to HR people and others. And they get it. They absolutely get it.
Yeah.
But you get it, but do you practice it? Do you actually apply it? Because if we did, I think that too would cut down a lot of the instances we're seeing. It's one thing to fire someone, it's another thing the way you fire someone. And so if we apply the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have others do unto you, in society as well as in business, I think that would at least alleviate some of that pressure valve that we see when you have normally rational people who are caught up in an emotionally irrational moment in the workplace.
Right. I mean, as Christians, we need to have the fruit of the Spirit list like in front of us all of the time, right? So how I'm going to respond, is this gentle, is this loving, is this self-controlled?
Oh.
And I think self-control is the big one when it comes to personal safety on both sides of it,
Oh, yeah.
because if you have self-control, instead of panic, you're going to be safer.
Well, even when you're talking self-control, that speaks to the ego.
Right.
And there is nothing more fragile on the planet than the human ego. Which goes back to that's why you want to treat others the way you want to be treated, because we
Well.
all have an ego to contend
Well,
with.
pride comes before a
Before
fall.
and a haughty spirit before a stumble, absolutely.
Exactly. So, I mean, those biblical principles are in there for a reason. And obviously, it does connect to our safety. And I think that when we walk into the workplace, as a Christian, we have an extra responsibility to walk some of these things out. And physical safety is a huge part of it. It starts in the heart, but it definitely manifests physically. And so I think it's great that Defense by Design can come in and you are teaching us about, how to be safe at work and how to consider these things that otherwise, we don't think about. We just clock in and we just go about our business and do our jobs.
Well, I'll tell you, the interesting thing I've seen this last year are companies and corporations not only hired me to train their employees, but they're now hiring me to train their clients. They call them client value adds. And that's something that really this year has taken me off guard. But I love the fact that they're actually extending the training now to their clients,
Right.
their patients, their customers. What an incredible outreach PR, Christian, if you will,
Yeah.
approach to this of being your brother and sister's keeper.
For people who are interested in more information about how to be safer in the workplace, employers who are watching today, and they want to be good employers, especially those who are faith-driven.
Yes.
How can they get in touch with you?
Simply defensebydesign.com. That's the website, or Jeff at defensebydesign.com, and then we can talk from there. But the key is be proactive. Prevention is only prevention if seen through the eyes of foresight, not hindsight.
I like that. It's so good. Thank you again for coming. You help us feel safer and more aware, and we appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you all for watching us today here at Join Our Town.